Hey y'all, if you are returning to my channel, welcome back, and if you're new, welcome aboard. So this week we're going to be doing another Disney history and trivia video. This week we're going to be doing the animated Disney classic, 101 Dalmatians. I'm talking about 101 Dalmatians today because when I was planning out my content, I was like, what's a on this day in Disney history that is for the Thursday for this week? And your girl can't look at a calendar, apparently. So I realized after I had already done all of the research and everything and was getting ready to film this, that in fact, 101 Dalmatians did not come out on the 26th when this video is supposed to go up. It came out on the 25th. So, go me. Could I post this early? Probably, if I had the gumption to get it edited, but I probably won't. So you're probably seeing this on the 26th, which I intended to have a this day in Disney history, 101 Dalmatians was released. But instead we are having, on this day in Disney history, 101 Dalmatians was 1 day old. So, in 1961, on January 25th, 101 Dalmatians was released in theaters. So a little bit of the history on 101 Dalmatians. If you're like me, you've at some point sat around going, is there a single Disney movie that is not based on something else? You know, a Grimm's fairy tale, or a Shakespeare story, or a wives' tale, anything. Aesop's fables. It doesn't matter. Every Disney story seems to be based on something, and then you may have come to the conclusion, 101 Dalmatians, probably not based on anything. I don't think there's any real life events that that's based on. I don't remember a story. Meaghan, you just didn't know. There is a story. It was called 101 Dalmatians, and it was by Dodie Smith. It was released in 1956. It became serialized in Women's Day, and they would post one little piece of the story at a time, and it was called The Great Dog Robbery. So that was like the story that they were telling throughout this magazine. And so that was what 101 Dalmatians was based on. Walt Disney read the book, I guess, in 1956, and he immediately was like, I need to make a movie out of this. The only problem with this is now that we are ready to make 101 Dalmatians, the company has no money. We've just come off of Sleeping Beauty, which was way uber expensive, so much money, so much animation, and it bombed. Like, there was not a lot of inflow of cash to the Walt Disney Company at the time. Walt was really focused on the theme parks. He had been getting, Disneyland up and running, so they had to actually lay off. They went from 500 to 100 in the animation department. They just laid everyone off, and they were like, I don't know that we can keep making movies. They actually, for a while, talked about the possibility of shutting down the animation studios completely and just focusing on live action and theme parks, because that was what they were doing the most of at the time. And Walt obviously wanted to stick with the roots. He wanted to stay with animation. He was like, come on, let's try. So he was like, let's figure out a way to do it. And our boy of iWorks was the one who was able to make it happen. He was like, we know of this thing. We've been working with it. It's called xerography. Ye old Xerox. So yeah, photocopies are what made 101 Dalmatians possible, because they had to cut the budget like way, way, way back. Kind of like if you have seen my Dumbo history and trivia video, kind of like they did after Fantasia, where they had no money left and they had to like really dumb down the backgrounds and do a whole bunch of like little tricks to make this movie as efficiently and as economically as possible. So if you haven't seen that, I'll link it down in the description for you. But that's kind of what we were having to do with this one. Making these photocopies enabled them to take the animation straight from the animators, these drawings straight from the animators, to the animation cells. They didn't have to be redone. They didn't have to go through the inking and painting process, which initially was how all of the movies were made. They did the rotoscoping, and then they'd transfer that, and they'd trace everything, they'd go back in with the colors. There was a ton of people, a ton of time, and a ton of effort that we didn't have the money for. So now we're just gonna take that, we're gonna photocopy it, paste it into the cell, and we have a movie. It also enabled them to actually make the movie, because if they had had to hand draw all those spots, impossible, wouldn't have happened. So their ability to just take the straight animation and use that was really what made them able to make the movie, even if they hadn't had a financial crisis on their hands. But because they were using these photocopies, these Xerox copies of the animators' sketches, that's why when you see 101 Dalmatians, you probably thought, this looks like sketchy. Like, not dodgy, not weird, just it looks like it's been sketched. There's these like weird stray lines on here, and that's why, because that's literally what it was. They couldn't refine it as much because they were using the photocopies. Animators didn't really know any different, because that's what they always gave to them. They always gave their sketches to the inkers, and they would, refine it. we're just skipping that step and going straight to, this is what I drew. So you can see in the scenery, the backgrounds especially, you can tell that there's like a nice like free-form, hand-drawn look to 101 Dalmatians. And for some people, that's part of the charm. They really like it. Some people, they think it's a little weird and like not Disney-esque. But it actually became the Disney standard up until The Rescuers. The Rescuers was the first movie in '77 where they were able to finally start softening those edges, able to refine it more. And so you can kind of see the 60s and 70s movies, they've got a little bit more of a rough-hewn quality to them than some of the previous or later Disney animated classics. So something to look for the next time you're watching one of those, the lost years, the 60s and 70s. As far as the animation, team, they still did have the 9 old men, and so those guys were still working on it. Wolfgang Reitherman and Mark Davis, our good friend Mark Davis, who gave us Jungle Cruise and Haunted Mansion and Pirates and the Tiki Room. He really hooked ad-lib up, I'm just saying. But he was the main animator for our girl Cruella. All the other animators worked on like everything, but Cruella was the only character that he was like, I got this. I'm good. I'm gonna crank this one out. So Cruella was the only character that was done solely by one person, and that person was Mark Davis. A couple of it's not really firsts because one's a first and one's a second, but the numerical facts, I guess. So, I always like to include some of those. This was the first film to have, a first Disney film, to use one person for the story writing. And I'm not sure how they really classify this because like they were based it off of a book, but I'm guessing like the screenplay was written by one person. It wasn't a team of people. It was just one guy, Bill Pease. This was the second movie made and be out there during the time frame in which it's set. The first was Dumbo. It's got a lot of connections to our little flying elephant here. But the first one was Dumbo. The second one was 101 Dalmatians. You can see on the newspaper the day after the puppies had been kidnapped. Dog napped. It says November 1958. So you can tell the 50s, 60s, that's the time frame that they were creating the movie, that the movie was out, and that's the time frame in which the movie takes place. One other thing about the story and the creation of the movie before we move on to the fun facts is Perdita. Purdy, the mom dog. Purdy was not the mom in the original story. Perdita means lost, and she was a stray in the story, and she was brought in by the family who owned Pongo, and Mrs., who was Pongo's lady, they brought Perdita in to be a wet nurse for their puppies. I guess Mrs. couldn't nurse the puppies or something, so Perdita got brought in. But that's where Perdita came from. She was originally a stray, but then she has kind of gotten incorporated more thoroughly into the movie version. All right, we're moving on to the trivia, the fun facts, the little Easter eggs and the fun things about the actors. That's my favorite part. There's a lot of Disney, I'm not going to say Disney Legends because that's like an actual title that people can receive, but a lot of people that you recognize from other Disney movies within this movie. So a couple of them you might recognize. Cruella, she's pretty distinctive. She was voiced by Betty Lou Gerson, and she is actually the narrator from Cinderella. I don't know that I ever would have picked that one out. The other ones I have recognized. You will recognize J. Pat O'Malley pretty much every time you hear him. He's got a very distinctive voice, and he is the voice of Colonel, the dog, in 101 Dalmatians. He's also Jasper, one of Cruella's henchmen, but he's also Colonel Hathi in the Jungle Book. He is Otto the dog from Robin Hood, and he's pretty much everyone from the entire Tweedledee Tweedledum section of Alice in Wonderland. He plays the Walrus, the Carpenter, and Tweedledee. So you might recognize his voice, and if you're listening really closely to the Canine Crunchy song, you may recognize that voice. This one may not jump out at you immediately, but that is actually the voice of Lucille Bliss, who played Anastasia in Cinderella. So we have a couple of Cinderella connections here too, but that is who did that little uncredited clip in there, was the voice of Anastasia. She's also the voice of Smurfette. That's probably where most people would recognize her from, and if you had not yet connected Anastasia and Smurfette, you're welcome. The last voice that you might recognize, you probably recognize him more by face. If you are a Sound of Music fan like your girl here, the voice of Roger is Ben Wright, and he is also Herr Zeller in The Sound of Music. So he's not really in anything else Disney, but I recognized him from that, and I was like, oh my gosh, I know who that is, so I just wanted to share. A couple of the fun little Easter egg things, we always like to talk about those. The puppies, when they are watching TV in Hell Hall, they are watching Springtime from Silly Symphonies. But the main Easter eggs are some puppy cameos that we have in 101 Dalmatians, and they are all of our friends from Lady and the Tramp. The pound puppies, Peg and Bull, from Lady and the Tramp. You can see them in a pet shop window in 101 Dalmatians. You can also see Jacques. He's the little terrier guy from Lady and the Tramp, and he goes and starts the Twilight bark through the like drain pipe. He like goes running over to it and woos into it and starts it from there. And then you can also see Lady and Tramp themselves at kind of the end of the Twilight bark. You can see it like radiating out through all of London, and there's Tramp on top of a car and Lady standing in the foreground. So you can see some of our puppy friends made a little cameo in this movie too. Athena hit my camera. Sorry, we're all out of whack. We'll finish it up here. So that is it for today. That was my history and trivia for 101 Dalmatians. Let me know what other videos you would like to see in the new year. I know that we've got some Disney stuff coming up, but I'm thinking about also kind of starting to do some non-Disney things as well, just to mix things up a little bit. Let me know what you think. And also, do you have a favorite dog from 101 Dalmatians? Like, mine was Rolly growing up, because like snacks, obviously. Snacks are life. So let me know who your favorites are down below. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye, y'all.